Nerdcast Empire is on the air. We are back with another week of podcasting excellence on the Nerdcast Empire. I am Matt in the studio. Great to have you along with us. We are back for another episode of Music Weekly. It is the music of February the 7th as we jump into a new month of music. Hard to believe that we've already gotten through 1 month of music, but we're really kind of in the full swing of things now as we're getting pretty much full release schedules from all the big record labels, which has allowed us to actually have a full list of things to review each and every week, which is certainly makes our job a lot more interesting and a lot more fun. So we got another great week of music. We got some news headlines as well. All kinds of good stuff coming your way this week on the Nerdcast Empire. Joining me in studio, as always, is Mike. Mike, how's it going?
It's going. Had a pretty good week of music, I think. Like you mentioned, we're kind of now to the point where we're getting full release slates, and it's not just, trying to find the diamonds out of 12 new albums, as we saw earlier in the year.
Yes.
But yeah, a lot of cool news stories, and I think the music overall was definitely out there as far as variety goes, and I think we picked some good stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And, when you have 12 releases, diamonds look a lot different than they do when you have 100 releases.
Absolutely.
For sure. Much more, just a well-rounded week. And again, some interesting stuff. Even some stuff we didn't pick that I thought was really interesting this week, and we can kind of get to that. And we can also talk a little about the new Dream Theater release. We didn't pick that one, but obviously that would be one that we would both endorse. Really excited to see those guys coming back with some new music. The track that was on the playlist sounded really good. I knew it was going to be 8 minutes long before I ever got there, but I'm really excited to get to hear the whole thing because I have a feeling it's going to be excellent.
Yeah, definitely. Dream Theater's always solid, but I think having Mike Portnoy back, not that Mike Mangini couldn't fill his shoes from a musicianship standpoint, he certainly could, but when you have a longtime member return and the band's always kind of been partially his, I think there's a certain familiarity and creative spark that can bring about. So I'm a few tracks into it and really enjoying it so far and can't wait to hear the rest.
Yeah, for sure. That's going to be good stuff. And again, we certainly endorse that, but like I said, we do try to maybe go a little bit more off the beaten path for our picks. Those guys don't need our help getting word out about their new album. I think everybody's been really excited about it. But we're going to get to some news headlines before we talk about our picks for this week. And this one to me was really interesting, and I don't really know what to make of it yet. And I think that's what makes it so interesting to me. And we've had similar articles on the anime side. Now we're getting one on the metal side. This is the article's from Blabbermouth. Talks about Camelot drummer officially launches Rock, ROKK, streaming service with fair compensation for artists at its core. That's Alex Landenberg, who's the drummer, and also Mentalist guitarist Peter Moog have launched this service. And the goal, obviously, is to populate it with rock and metal music, and for a subscription fee, allow you to subscribe and be able to stream this music a la Spotify. But the hope is that, number one, it's going to be very rock and metal centric, which I think is something we certainly would be interested in. But I think the bigger thing is the hope is that it will do well enough that artists can be fairly compensated for these streams, as opposed to what you typically see with Spotify, with YouTube, where you're talking fractions of a cent per stream, and for some of these bands, there's no way to make any kind of a living off the streams. You're just hoping that people catch them and then hopefully will buy the physical release. But I'm very curious what this ends up looking like, how successful it will be, because obviously you're going to need a lot of people to jump on board with this if you want it to be successful. I'm sure they have venture capital backing it first that will allow them to. Typically, these things, they hoard a bunch of money so they can pay out at first what they want to pay out, and then they hope that the subscriptions will basically make it so you can sustain that. Whether that happens or not, I don't know. But, I mean, give these guys credit, because this is a really cool idea.
Yeah, it's certainly attempting to address a problem that we hear about pretty regularly as far as new albums and bands being compensated, and what the threshold even is for bands to be compensated to begin with, because it's not like you just get paid out for every individual stream. You have to meet a certain amount of streams just to even see anything, and even then, it seems like it's pretty measly, unfortunately. I kind of like the quotes from it. They talk about wanting to make the ultimate streaming platform for all things hard and heavy, superior sound quality, and finally fair compensation. I'm curious about the sound quality because I guess maybe I wasn't aware that there was necessarily. I mean, I'm sure streaming through Spotify isn't the same as having your 320 lossless FLAC file or whatever that you're listening to. It's probably not that good, but I've not really thought, man, this sounds horrible. They also mentioned offering direct artist support for your favorite band or musician right on the app. I kind of wonder if that doesn't maybe point to the possibility of kind of integrating a band's merchandise hub into the app, where there's a track I'm liking or a band I really like. With one click, I can check out, merchandise, shirts, patches, whatever, and kind of feel like that's more integrated into your experience as opposed to having to go and search for them outside of like a Spotify.
Yeah, I think that would be the goal, to kind of make it a one-stop shop where you don't have to try to hunt these bands down once they pop up in the algorithm. And I should note, it's starting off in Europe. That's where the app is launching through iOS, Android, and on the web at rockk-app.com. The hope, obviously, is to clear rights to be able to do this worldwide as you go, but they're starting off with Europe. So, it'll be interesting to see, I guess, just how many people jump on board. They're starting off with a trial run of €8.99 to start, and then it'll jump to $10.99 a month. Says no strings attached, cancel anytime.
And that's after an introductory free month trial too.
Yes, so they're certainly, and that's what makes you think, okay, they definitely have some venture capital behind this to be able to do this for free and hopefully be able to pay out as well a little bit later on. And
one thing I didn't see on there, maybe I just missed it, is to whether or not this would be ad supported.
I don't remember seeing that. And I think there are probably some rules in Europe about how much they're allowed to do that. I know that's one of those things you hear about a lot when we talk about wrestling content, is like people in the UK will complain about all the ads on US television. So there could be some laws and regulations in the European Union and in the UK that might not allow you to do the ad-supported tier. I would have to think if they look to expand to the United States at some point, they would certainly consider your ad-supported tier to try to give you maybe a little bit of a cheaper option.
A couple other things to point out with it as well is they boast 60 million songs available right now, with 10,000 new songs added weekly. So that's definitely really cool. I'm kind of curious again about the fair compensation, because obviously people aren't real keen on how streaming pays artists presently. In the article, they do mention that Spotify's CEO basically says, look, we give 70% of every dollar generated to the rights holders of the music. Where the money goes from there, that's kind of up to the agreements made by the artists and everyone involved and the rights holders. So I just, how are they going to be able to pay out differently where they can assure that the artists are getting a reasonable percent, when it sounds like that's really out of their hands?
I mean, that is certainly, it's certainly what they're going to say. That, oh, well, it's not our fault. It's clearly the greedy record labels. But if the revenue off of these streams is a few cents and they're giving half of that or 70% of that to the artist, they still might not be making that much. So that to me is, if you would assume that some of that will trickle down, even with this new system, to the artist, the amount that they're making off of these streams, whether it be subscriptions or ad-based, has to be a substantial amount more than what they're making on YouTube streams or Spotify.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're still running into the problem where you're trying to slice a really small pie into really small pieces. And it's hard to say that that's going to be sustainable for very long. At some point, this operation has to at least break even, I would think. So,
and I think that's more the reason, to my point earlier, that at the end of the day, buy the actual product from the artists themselves, buy the merchandise, buy any cool limited edition whatnot that they have out there, because you feel like at least then you're kind of supporting them through something substantial and not just bandwidth.
I'm seeing them on tour as well. Like
Yeah.
especially if they're touring small venues, like when they're on these big festival tours, you know that they're not getting a lot. And in some cases, some of the small bands that might open these dates, maybe getting nothing at all other than maybe a hotel room and the opportunity to be on stage. But if they're playing your local pool hall, like go see them, because that's money directly to them and allows them to keep making music. And that's the big thing we always stress about on this podcast is if you hear something you like, whether it's something we pick or something on Mike's playlist, try to pick it up, because that's going to allow these bands to keep doing what they're doing. And streaming is never going to be the full answer, even if this is far more lucrative to these bands than Spotify or YouTube is.
For sure. I also thought it was kind of wild at the end of the article. They point out that Spotify, as of December 2024, has 675 million monthly active users, of which 263 million of them pay for premium. That's just staggering to me.
It is. And I wonder what's the percentage on the YouTube side, because I don't even use Spotify, to be completely transparent and honest. I did have listened to it at times, but I'm a YouTube person. I typically listen to YouTube for music, and I have premium, so I do pay for it. Yeah. So I'm wondering what the percentage of YouTube users are who use YouTube for music that also pay for premium. Is that ratio similar to what is the case with Spotify, where you've got about a third of your users who decide, hey, this is my primary music app, I'm going to pay for the premium and get everything that goes with that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I only use Spotify typically when I'm in my car listening to playlists, because I have my phone running Bluetooth to my car stereo system, and it's just easier to use a streaming service on my phone at the same time.
Sure.
They work better together that way.
Yeah, and I imagine you're not alone in that use case. So I give these guys credit. Certainly excited to see where this goes. Hopefully it's something that does well enough in Europe that they expand it beyond that. Those rights and stuff take time to negotiate. So if you are in the States or in Asia or somewhere like that, and you're excited for this thing to get there, my guess is it's not going to be right away. It's going to take some time to negotiate all that. But anything that gets more rock and metal out there and gets artists more fairly compensated, I'm certainly on board with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we'll keep an eye on that story and see how it develops as the app really takes off. I had to throw this story in there because I know Mike's a big Gwar fan, so I know he was already well aware that this was happening, but it's a chance for him to talk about it and let everybody else know that it is happening. Of course, Gwar announces their 40th anniversary shows. The headline lists Toxic Holocaust, I Hate God, and more. You're also going to get Aether Realm and Tracheotomy also on that tour. This, no surprise to see them playing with some bands that have some very fun names, but Arch Enemy as well. The tours, there's a couple of sections of the tour with different bands on different sections, which is typically, how these tours kind of line up. They've got a tour with Static X and Dope and A Killer's Confession also. So, they're going to be busy. They're going to be out there. Like I said, I know you're a huge Gwar fan. You've seen them multiple times. Excited for this tour, I would assume?
Yeah, for sure. It kind of looks like their appearance at Sonic Temple is kind of the precursor to the first leg of this tour, which is where I'll be seeing them next. I've not actually seen them live with the current lineup the way it is, with Blothar stepping in for Odorous after his passing. It's still pretty wild to think they've been around 40 years, and it's really cool that you have Michael Bishop, who is the character behind Blothar, formerly Beefcake the Mighty back in the classic days, stepping back in, rejoining the band, taking over lead vocals, and kind of dealing with a really horrible situation the best way you can. Like, you still kind of feel like it's Gwar at the end of the day. It's not to suggest that moving on from Odorous could ever be seamless, but I think they did it the best possible way. Not only that was, 2012-ish. Corey Smoot passed away in 2011, who was like a longtime member of the band as Flatus Maximus, was replaced for years by Brent Purgeson as Pustulus Maximus until he left last year, now being replaced by another Maximus character, Grodius Maximus, played by Tommy Meehan. all I can really say about this is if you've not seen Guar live, you owe it to yourself. If you're a fan of hard and heavy music, you owe it to yourself to see them because their show is unlike any other. It's the most entertaining metal concert you're ever going to go to, and at the end of the day, you might realize that they actually kind of rock too. And I've been a fan of theirs since the early 2000s and still am.
And I feel like a lot of their fans are very loyal, longtime fans, which also makes it a little easier to keep going because I think there is a feeling amongst the hardcore fan base that you want to continue to support not only the entity that is Guar, but these guys that have been, like you said, returning to the band, or new people that are trying to kind of keep the spirit of Guar alive. I think there's, because of the way they do their show and everything that goes into it, I think there's maybe more of a loyal fan base to what they do than a lot of other bands that would kind of fall into that same genre. And because of that, I think, whatever they decide to do tour wise, lineup changes, I feel like people are going to be on board with it because they just kind of want to see these guys continue to be able to do this show and get it out in front of as many people as possible before they eventually decide not to do it anymore.
Oh yeah, I would agree with that. I think given their stage show and everything about their presentation, even the music, I think they're in a weird position where you can kind of switch members in and out, and as long as you kind of have that same feeling where it feels like you're seeing Guar, I think it works for them, and I have no doubt that they still put on a tremendous show, even if it's been 15 years since I've seen them live.
Yeah, and again, a lot of other bands on the support, as I mentioned, different sets depending on when you see them on tour. We posted the link in the chat, so if you have maybe a secondary band that you prefer, you can kind of plan your trip to see these guys. They are, like Mike said, doing Sonic Temple in Columbus coming up as well this spring. So
I do want to share, I found on YouTube earlier when reading this article, for whatever reason, the one show of theirs that stands out to me the most still is back from 2008. They were doing this whole shtick leading up to the election where Sleazy P. Martini had these like tag team championship belts, and Odorous and Bone Snapper were in this wrestling tournament against all the major political candidates to earn the Frank Sinatra belts of total world domination. It's such a ridiculous premise of a show, but it starts out with a fake Steve Wilkos show where he's bad-mouthing Guar and they cut his head off and blood goes everywhere to the opening track Battle Lust, which is a tremendous opening track to begin with. But I found the full show on YouTube, and it's not tremendous quality because
it's 2008.
2008.
As you just saw if you watched our anime video or our retrospective on OhioCon, like technology and video has changed a lot.
But I can go ahead and share that. It's worth taking a look at just to kind of give you a glimpse, if you've not seen Guar, what their live show is kind of all about.
Yeah, it is an experience for sure. Definitely different than pretty much any metal or any other rock act in the world. So if you haven't seen them, your opportunity, you're going to get a chance to see them again. It's their 40th anniversary shows, really going coast to coast this year. So you definitely have an opportunity to check them out live. One other news item, more of a kind of a charity event that anytime we see these charity events pop up, we do like to kind of talk about them. And the news out that Sebastian Bach is going to headline the 2025 Rock for Ronnie, a concert in the park fundraiser event. And, of course, that is named after Ronnie James Dio. It is basically a cancer tribute for the name of the fund is the Ronnie James Dio Stand Up and Shout Cancer Fund. Really good lineup, as you would expect for this event. You can find out more information at diocancerfund.org/events. General admissions, $65. VIP tickets still available for $125. You've got, looks like Dio Disciples, Southern rock artist James Charles Miller, hard rock band Kill Devil Hill, and an all-star band which over the years has had some of the who's who in rock and metal join in. But definitely a really cool event. It's always great to see Sebastian Bach out touring. It's really the only chance to see him at this point is kind of as a solo artist. But again, always great to see these type of events where these guys get together and try to raise money for a good cause.
Yeah, absolutely. Where did I want to go with that? Well, Blabbermouth was acting weird, I would try to open up the website and then it would just disappear to a bunch of ads. So that was really, really obnoxious. It's kind of funny reading the article. They tout live music, food trucks, and fun for the whole family. I thought that was kind of wild.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sebastian Bach can still bring at his age, so he's always worth seeing live. They mentioned the All-Star Band, which in past has included artists like Doug Aldrich, Steven Adler, Chris Broderick, Phil Demmel, Dave Grohl, Adrian Vandenberg, Ricky Warwick, Brian Tichy, and etc. It seems like they don't necessarily know who's going to be there from year in and year out, but I'm sure that'll be a really cool thing. And yeah, it's kind of sad that Dio's been gone as long as he has, and dude is just an irreplaceable giant in the metal community.
For sure. If you're interested in going, you're going to want to be out west for that one. That's going to be in Los Angeles at the Autry Museum of the West on the South Lawn from 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. So mostly a daytime concert, and maybe that's where you got the fun for the whole family sort of thing. That it's kind of more of a daytime event than a nighttime event, but 100% of net proceeds from the rock for Ronnie will go to the Dio Cancer Fund, which is now in its 14th year of raising awareness and much-needed funding for cancer prevention, education, and research for a cure. The organization also hosts the annual Bowl for Ronnie celebrity bowling party in November.
Cool too.
So really awesome. Obviously, Ronnie James Dio is a legend. Even after his passing, we still celebrate him and, everything he did for music. And really cool event. If you're able to contribute or attend, I think you'll have a good time, and you're raising money for a good cause, which we certainly always like to talk about on the podcast. Just a reminder before we get to the new music section this week, don't forget to check out our website, nerdcastempire.com. You can check out our Twitch page, which is where we are 4 times a week live on twitch.tv/nerdcastempire. We've also been co-streaming on YouTube on our YouTube page, which is at nerdcastempire. We'll be back again tomorrow morning at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time for another episode of the Nerdcast News Report. We'll get your week started with all the nerdy news, including some good news for some friends of ours. I guess if you want to call them friends of the podcast, if you will. Anime convention that will be going forward, which is really exciting news. Also, we'll try to make sense of the Rock segment from SmackDown on Friday. That might take a while. We'll see if we can figure that out. Some other really cool news stories for you in the morning, 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Join us live on Twitch or on YouTube, or you can always catch us on the VOD wherever you listen to that. It's time to get to our new music. You know how this works by now. We are going to talk about the best rock and metal from February the 7th. Mike will go through each and every week. He will put together a playlist. I will share that playlist right now in both the YouTube and the Twitch chats, where he goes through and pulls one song off of all the new releases for the week, and then we'll basically go through and we will listen to everything, pick 2 bands each that we really want to spotlight, and then we will bring those to you each and every Sunday night. So really good stuff this week. Like you said, we mentioned the Dream Theater album. I think that is definitely worthy of your attention if you are a fan of the band. There were a couple really cool, interesting acts on the playlist. I definitely encourage you to check it out. There was a wide variety of stuff this week. But we think we have chosen the 4 best, at least as far as we're concerned, and we're going to get to those at this time. So it's time to check out these new releases. And Mike, you're going to start us off. What do you have for your first new pick of the week?
Yeah, so for pick number 1, I am jumping back into the new wave of traditional heavy metal. A movement that seems to be just growing and growing as we go, which I'm super excited about. As for today, we are looking at the second full-length album from a band from Los Angeles, California. The band is called Saber, and the newest album is Lost in Flames.
Yeah, I had started listening to this when you had mentioned that you were thinking about picking it, and I'm I understand, because I was already very much enjoying the album. I think it's not going to take you very long to get through it. It's not a real long album, but I think they've packed in some really awesome stuff in the 28 minutes that this album brings to you.
Yeah, absolutely. This is the follow-up to their debut from 2021, Without Warning. I noticed that the newest album is being released by Roar, Rock of Angels Records, who I found out during my research has actually merged with Reigning Phoenix Music, who we've talked about before. They're the label that released the most recent Halloween Live at Budokan release. So that's really cool, and I'm all for these companies kind of growing and getting larger, and definitely worth paying attention to as far as if you're into metal, because both have released some really killer stuff lately.
Yep.
That being said, they're also re-releasing Saber's prior album, so that will be
awesome.
Really cool to get a hold of it that way as well. It's kind of interesting as far as the band lineup goes, because the Metal Archive didn't necessarily agree with the Reigning Phoenix website's bio on the band, so I'm not really sure how that works and who is actually what I'm pretty sure of is we have Dave Sanchez on bass, Steven Villa on vocals, Jesus Decay on drums, and then where it gets a little odd is the bio site lists Joel Dominguez on guitar, whereas the Metal Archive lists Yolo and Antonian Pedinato on guitar. So I'm not sure where to go with that, but whoever's playing the music, they're doing a tremendous job. As their bio states, and you can easily identify when listening to the album, they kind of have this blend of traditional heavy metal and kind of a sleaze rock thing going on. I think Steven's vocals would work, whether he was fronting a band from the Bay Area in the 80s or a band on the Sunset Strip. I think it's kind of that in between a thrash vocal style and a hair band, essentially. And that kind of goes for their whole look and presentation. There's a pic on the Reigning Phoenix's website that you look at these guys and you think, man, they could have hung out in either metal camp and probably been pretty cool and gotten in and fit in pretty well with both sides. If you're a fan of the new wave of traditional heavy metal movement, I think it's cool because a lot of the fans that are into that kind of stuff, I think, appreciate all sides of classic metal.
Yeah.
And these guys represent numerous styles, kind of all thrown into one. Album's only 8 tracks and 28 minutes long, so you can knock it out pretty easily, and it's definitely well worth a full listen. Standout tracks for me include Phoenix Rising, Shattered Dream, Shadow of You, and the track that I picked to check out, the title track, Lost in Flames.
So let's check this out. This is Saber and their release, Lost in Flames. This is the title track and the opening track to that album, Lost in Flames. Let's listen to a little bit of that now. Couldn't resist to leave some of the solo stuff in there.
Yeah,
That's
for sure.
just really high quality stuff. Again, I mean, it's just a band that has guys at every position that clearly are really, really talented. You heard the guitars there at the end. The vocals are really strong. The bass, the drums, it all just kind of complements everything that's going on. I like I said, I didn't get a chance to finish listening to this. I went and paused and jumped to something else, but I'm excited to go back and hear this whole thing because what I've heard of it so far is just really excellent.
What I liked about it is, well, a lot of things, but one thing that's kind of hit or miss with that style of music is I felt like even though their inspiration and their sound felt kind of retro, the production didn't. It wasn't like they went to artificial means to make it sound like their album was produced in 1982. Like, It still felt like very modern production playing traditional metal.
Yeah, and I feel like that's an issue sometimes when you're going for that retro sound, is they feel like they need to gimmick the sound of it and be like, oh, we got to make it sound like we recorded it in 1982 instead of just making it good and kind of letting that stand through. So yeah, kudos to them for that, because that to me makes it stand out over some of the other ones we've heard over the more than a year we've been doing this podcast, where it's like, that sounds good, but I feel like what you tried to do there takes away from it a little bit.
Yeah, I would agree.
Check those guys out. Saber, really excited to see the new record label and the new re-release of their first album. Check all that stuff out. As always, you have 2 picks. We're gonna get to pick number 2 now. What do you got? We got an EP coming up for pick number 2, but again, really good stuff here. What do you got for us?
Yeah, if that 28 minutes of the Saber album was just way too much for you to commit, don't worry, I got you covered. I have an EP here from A band from South London, UK. It is their second EP from this hard rock trio, follow up to their 2022 EP, City Sins. The band is Dead Air, and the new EP is Elements.
Yeah, this is another one that I'd mark for a full listen, and really enjoyed the track on the playlist. And I'm excited to see where this group goes from here. But this is a really, really strong EP.
Yeah, absolutely. This one, like, just the video caught me pretty much right off the bat. The drums and the bass line and vocals, just I thought, man, this feels like something special. And it's, again, not very long, but it gets there, and every track sounds unique, and it's really enjoyable. The band consists of Ruben Munasar on vocals and bass, Richard Greenberry on drums, and Lyle Salvatore on guitars. The review on this album from Distorted Sound Mag's website points out that the band wrote this while going through some struggle in their individual lives, and you could definitely feel the emotion in the songs. They also mentioned how the band kind of goes about creating their sound by having a different instrument of the three kind of lead each song through. So you kind of feel like there's different instruments each time kind of out in the front, kind of taking you through the track, and it allows for the song to feel unique from the others. And I definitely think they achieved that. Like, none of the songs on the album sound the same. It doesn't feel like the same thing over and over again. To me, this is just really good hard rock from a great power trio. It's emotive without being emo or angsty. And really hoping, just kind of looking at their play count, I hope it breaks through really well, and maybe they end up getting to tour over here in the States. There's only 4 tracks, so the whole album is a really quick listen and worth it. No room for filler in any of that. If I were to pick one track to kind of start with, it would be the first track of the album, Die, which is the one that I picked to check out tonight.
We're going to listen to that. This is Dead Air and their EP, Elements. This is the first track off of that album, Die. So let's listen to a little bit of that now.
Scream out, nobody's listening, not to my surprise. Why did I go fuck this up and die? Too late to start moving on. We hurt just a little bit. I feel so hurt, 'cause we're no time to tell you I was wrong. I left and I lived it down. Now I'm coughing at this rap. We're so precious, taking over ominous clothes.
Yeah, one thing that's really evident is the bass in this song. Like,
Yeah.
you can definitely hear it driving the song, and it's so unusual for modern rock to hear the bass pushing it. But like you said, the fact that they've kind of spotlighted the different instruments and different tracks, I think is really a neat idea, and it also ensures that not every song is going to sound the same. And I think sometimes these bands, when they release EPs, because it's only 4 songs, they kind of all mush together. Like, you don't have that full album to kind of
Yeah.
let things work out. But I think they've taken a really interesting tack to not do that by allowing the different instruments to shine, and that bass there right at the end of the chorus was just like, okay, like, it's clearly driving the melody, and I think that's really cool. But excited to hear more from this.
Yeah, and that's kind of the first thing that hits you in the song. It starts with a pretty basic drum beat, and then that bass picks up, and you're like, okay, this is different than what I normally hear. Let's see where they go with it. And yeah, I think the whole 4-track EP thing is kind of smart, because it gives you that opportunity to say, how do we come up with 4 totally distinct things, where by track 7 or 8 you're not kind of rehashing
Yeah.
old material or listening to things that sound just a little too familiar to earlier in the album. And there's also not that noticeable drop off that you get sometimes with bands, where they might have a 12-track album, but they really only wrote like 6 or 7 songs. So yeah, really, really excited to hear more from these guys, and I think it's definitely worth checking out.
Yeah, for sure. Really excited to get to finish listening to that EP, but I thought it was really, the first track I heard was really excellent. Excited to hear the whole thing. Dead Air. Definitely check those guys out. Excited to see them. I think this is kind of a week for bands that are, for whatever reason, a little under the radar, that I think, would love to see them really take off, which leads us to my 2 picks that we have this week. And we're going to start things off with a Finnish heavy metal band, originally formed in 1986. This is the band Stud with Under Silver Sky. It's a little deceiving to say that they formed in 1986 because obviously a lot of their history has occurred recently. They were active until 1989, then disbanded, reformed in 2013, and they've been going ever since. This is their fifth full-length album. All of them have been released since they got back together in 2013, featuring Ari Toivonen on vocals, Mika Kansikas on guitars, Stenda Kukkonen on drums, and Lauri Leno on bass. It's just a great melodic rock album. Obviously, it's something that was right up my alley as soon as I listened to it. But there are some different tones in there. There's some progressive parts. Some of it sounded like classic rock. Some of it was even kind of new wave of British heavy metal, which from a band from the late 80s or mid 80s, you kind of understand where that comes from. Well, their story is kind of interesting. They started off as a band that sang in Finnish in 1986. They switched singers pretty much right away to Toivonen, then changed their language to English, which kind of allowed them to reach a bigger audience, as you would expect. They toured pretty extensively in the late 80s, had planned to release an album in the late 80s, but according to their website, failed to make a deal with a record company since new, darker music had increased in popularity in Finland.
That sounds about right.
That sounds about right. So what we know about Finnish heavy metal. They finished out their tour dates. They broke up, and that could have been the end of it, but it wasn't. They got back together in 2013, which is really exciting because they're very talented, and it's great to see them rolling again. It's another album that should have way more listens on YouTube Music. It's just really, really solid start to finish. Really excited about this one. Standout tracks include If Living Is So Easy, Alone, Castaway, and the song we're going to listen to on the podcast is Under Silver Sky. So let's check this out. This is Stud from Finland with the album Under Silver Sky. This is the title track, track number 5 on this album. Let's listen to a little bit of that now.
Wake up when the sun is rising. The breeze in your hair. Open your senses. It feels like you're born again. Lay down under silver sky. Let your spirit flow free. Sweet taste of your summer wine. Another beautiful day.
But the sound, even as you hear outside of the chorus, definitely has that kind of 80s, like classic rock, mainstream rock vibe to it, which I really enjoyed. But really excited for these guys. Again, 5th studio album since they got back together in 2013. I think it's really excellent from beginning to end. So definitely encourage you to check it out. Your thoughts on Stud?
Yeah, I thought it was a really good sound. It makes me wonder when we run into bands like this who maybe petered out initially in the late 80s, but then kind of had a resurgence in the last 10 or 15 years. Do you think some of that is just due to the greater accessibility of equipment to record stuff into, privately as opposed to having to rely on professional studios?
I have to assume that's the case. If a studio didn't want you in 1989,
You're out of luck.
you're out of luck. You couldn't do it at home. You had to rely on a studio and studio time and their backing and everything that goes with that. But now it's like you don't have to do that, or you can find independent companies that want to produce your music. And I think that's 100% the case with a lot of these bands that maybe started in the 80s and didn't release anything, and then these guys released like one single, and now they're able to release full-length albums and do very well. And like I said, hopefully these guys will kind of catch on with this one because I think it's really, really good.
Yeah, it definitely speaks to what we talk about a lot as far as someone's out there making the music that you love. You just have to find it. I think with the greater accessibility of recording options, there's just so much more music that's able to be made where you're not relying on the trends and what's selling. Because if that were the case, there'd be so little rock music being produced in the Western world at this point.
For sure. And we get to hear it each and every week, and that's why I love doing this podcast, because you get exposed to so much great music that's out there. I would have never found this band, ever. No chance.
No, not at all.
Maybe either one of the bands that I picked this week. So that's why I love doing this, because it's a great way to see that, hey, there's still great music out there. You just got to hunt for it, and we try to do that and bring it to you each and every week. So, again, that's Stud. Definitely check those guys out. Really great album. Second band this week, we are going back to the UK once again. This is a band that is from Newcastle. Classify themselves as anthemic rock. You certainly can see where they're coming from here. This is the band Juliet's Not Dead with This World Is Ours. This band was originally named Twister, but changed their name in August of 2024 to Juliet's Not Dead, as they felt like they needed a more unique name to kind of allow them to take their sound to the next level. The band is made up of frontman Stevie Stoker, drummer Jack Corbett, bassist Niall Whitaker, and guitarist Dan King. This is a group that's got a little bit of everything going on. There's got some 80s sounds, some 90s sounds, some modern rock. They've blended everything very well to kind of give you something that sounds like it could be on modern radio with some elements of classic rock and metal of the past. I think that's a really good thing. I did kind of crack up. Rockposer.com described the song Thrill Seekers as Ozzy Osbourne if he fronted My Chemical Romance. If you listen to that track, you'll see that's not a terrible description of that. But I do think they mean that as a complimentary way. But that does kind of go to that classic rock meets more of a different era of rock.
My Chemical Romance isn't far off from being classic by now.
I know. I was gonna say like more modern, but they're actually classic rock at this point. This is an album that really should be on the radio, whether it's over-the-air radio or satellite radio. To me, this is what mainstream rock should sound like. And this album is doing very well for these guys in the UK. Has reached number 1 on the album download charts, number 2 on the UK rock and metal chart, and 4 other chart placements. So really kind of feels like a breakout moment for this band, which is really exciting because I really think this is excellent stuff. Standout tracks include Thrill Seekers, Battle Scarred, Open Fire, and the song we're going to listen to on this album, Sinner or Saint. So let's check these guys out. This is Juliet's Not Dead with their release This World Is Ours. This is the opening track off of that album, Sinner or Saint. Let's listen to a little bit of that now.
God, can you deliver me from misery? One stop from infinity. There's a monster running wild. God, please take away my memory. I'll be the sinner I was meant to be. Now there's a monster running wild. Under my head with a voice.
But yeah, just a really catchy songs, really great rock. Again, good balance of modern and classic rock. And again, it's clearly taking off. Hasn't taken off on YouTube Music yet. The play counts are kind of low. I have a feeling this is a group that you're going to hear a lot more about over the next few years, as this really kind of feels like their breakthrough into maybe a situation where they'll be able to tour a little wider, maybe even possibly over to the States at some point. But really, really dug this album. Your thoughts on these guys?
Yeah, I love these guys' sound as well. I think it's great to have a band like this who can feel modern without really sacrificing that classic rock instrumentation, where it's not overly digital. And, if these guys were to lose their laptop, they might still be able to perform live. That kind of mentality. Yeah, just really, really good stuff. And you want to see that kind of rock make a resurgence and become more popular because it's so accessible.
Yeah, and I think that's why I'm so excited to see them doing well in the UK charts. It's encouraging that the people over there are hearing it and seeing it, and they're like, yeah, this is what we want, more of this.
Yeah.
Would love to see that same thing happen over here in the States, but really enjoyed this album. I thought it was really, really excellent beginning to end. Kudos to those guys. This is just a really good week for music. Again, I think the picks we made and even some of the other stuff that we didn't make was just really, really good stuff. So definitely check
A lot of variety.
it out. Yeah, for sure. There was one, I was going to pull that up real quick, that I wanted to shout out because I did listen to this album. It wasn't 100% up my alley, but I wanted to shout it out. It was Gin Lady, Before the Dawn of Time. It was kind of a 70s rock-inspired album. I listened to that. It's really interesting. Like, if you're a fan of kind of a more, not quite psychedelic, but definitely kind of heading toward that end of the spectrum, definitely check that one out. I really, I dug that, just not as much as I dug the two that I picked. But again, like you said, great variety this week. And
Yeah,
I think,
I like that one. I like Arab Altar, which was
Yeah.
like doom Viking folk kind of music. It was really wild. I go through and I tag all the stuff that I enjoy with kind of what the either Bandcamp tags are
Yeah.
on our document, and you got like stoner metal, typically hard rock, Viking, melodic metal. This week was like sleazy punk rock, dark electro, punk Celtic folk, classic rock, just crust punk. Like I used a lot of different terms than maybe the normal week, and I think that's always really awesome.
yeah, for sure. If there's something out there that you like, there's probably an album this week that's going to speak to you. So definitely check out Mike's playlist and get the chance to pick your own picks this week. It's time to get into the vault, where Mike and I will give you classic albums you need to check out. And we are now to the end of Mike's run through Wikipedia's list of glam bands. He's gone through all 26 letters of the alphabet and has picked one band for each letter and spotlighted a classic album of theirs. You were to the letter Z.
I've made it.
And you have made it, as was the case last week. I would say Wikipedia. Maybe it's just the bands in general have not given you a lot of options for the letter Z. But I think that's actually a good thing, just like it was last week. Is I think you have a really interesting pick and a band that, honestly, I'd like to know a little more about after having listened to this album.
Yeah, this is a band who I really only knew their kind of most popular song. I wasn't familiar with what an entire album sounds like, or even more of their work. But they're a band that I now definitely want to learn more about. We are on the letter Z. There was one option, so I chose that option. In that option was the band Zebra, and I chose their debut album from 1983, self-titled, called Zebra.
Yeah, Chris asking if that can be done with new metal bands, putting that on his list of ideas. Like,
Sure.
I'm sure Wikipedia's got a list of new metal bands as well that would be good. But this is so interesting to me, and I know this has happened a couple times as you've gone through this list, where you have a band that has been technically classified as a glam band. And I don't know what Zebra stuff sounds like in the late 80s. But this album here is not a glam album by any stretch of the imagination. It is just great classic rock.
Yeah, to me, this was more like classic rock meets prog rock. As I was going through the album, my mindset was this was basically Yes meets Led Zeppelin.
Yeah.
And that's never a bad thing.
No, not at all.
Kind of getting a little into the band. Band formed in 1975 and features 3 members who are still in the band to this day. We have Randy Jackson, not that Randy Jackson, on guitars and vocals. Felix Hanneman on bass and Guy Gelso on drums. Jackson and Hanneman got their start together in a band called Shepherd's Bush, left and formed Maelstrom with Gelso. Originally a cover band, they played Zeppelin, Yes, Jethro Tull, Pink Floyd tracks.
Of course.
Not too surprising that those would be pretty heavy influences on them. They changed their name to Zebra and relocated to Long Island as they were playing a lot of gigs around that area. They got traction at local colleges and eventually the local station there, WBAB, which led to a deal with Atlantic. This album itself had 2 hit singles, Who's Behind Your Door, and the song that I was aware of and was fairly familiar with, Tell Me What You Want. Helped the album become one of Atlantic's fastest-selling debut albums, peaking at number 29 on the U.S. Billboard 200, certified gold by the RIAA, selling over 500,000 copies. We talked about the band a few weeks back in a news story, talking about how they're working on a new album and will be working with their longtime producer from back in the old days, Jack Douglas. This will be their first new album since 2003. So we've talked about it before with the Vault picks. It's always really cool when you see a band still out there doing it. And I think when we covered the news story, my thought was this band has kind of been this whole time. And we haven't had very many albums from them. They haven't released an album in 22 years. But at that point in time, I'd really never listened to any of their work before. And getting into this one, all I can say is this album's awesome.
Yeah.
You can really feel the inspirations. The vocals at times feel like Robert Plant, other times like John Anderson. The music has a similar thing where sometimes it feels rocking, sometimes it feels more prog folk kind of stuff, like more on the Yes side of things. I'm not remotely surprised that the band Dream Theater would cover these guys as a bonus track from their Black Clouds and Silver Linings album. Standout tracks on this album are Tell Me What You Want, One More Chance, as I said before, Who's Behind the Door, Take Your Fingers From My Hair, which is the track that Dream Theater covered. I mean, if you're into 70s era rock and any of the big bands, I think there's a lot to enjoy with this album.
This album flies by too, and part of it is because the front 2/3 of this album, the tracks are all relatively short, 2 to 3 minutes. You do have 1 5-minute track in Who's Behind the Door, and then out 2 of the last 3 tracks are your prog rock songs. 720 on Take Your Fingers
Dream
From My
Theater
Hand.
covers the longest track on the album.
Of course, like why? What else would they possibly cover? And then the La La song 612 to close out the album. This was great. Like, if you had just played this for me, I've always thought like their hit song sounds like Billy Squier. Like,
Yeah, that was my thought.
Feels
Feels very Rock Me Tonight.
yeah, and the rest of the album honestly is farther toward the prog and classic rock side. Like, if you want to say that his vocals do have like a hint of glam similarities to them, I can see that, especially in their hit song. But there's really nothing other than their hair that makes them a glam band. And when you hear their influences and hear where the bands they were covering, it totally lines up. I mean, this is a band that was heavily influenced by the best prog bands and classic rock bands of the 70s. And so, of course, that's what their sound's going to sound like. And, yeah, it's probably another case of a band that was wrong place, wrong time for their music. Like, obviously, they had the one big hit. But if this band comes out in 1975 and releases albums in the 70s, these guys are probably a heck of a lot bigger because all that stuff would have fit right in on the radio with these classic bands. Instead, they drop in the middle of the glam era, and like I said, this album's not really a glam album.
And I think that's part of the thing too. When I made the decision to use a Wikipedia list, I think I kind of baked in the idea that there could be bands on there that we look back and we say, why are they on that list? I don't know if they really fit there. And that's not to say they don't, but I'm not familiar enough with their full body of work. I know, like in the previous week with Y&T, they specifically stated one specific time frame where they were considered glam and not their entire career.
Right.
I don't know if Zebra has an image change and sound change over the years. If not, I would still kind of understand why their debut album was kind of the peak of their success commercially, because with this sound, it wasn't going to get more popular as you go into the 80s. It wasn't going to happen.
The only way that was going to happen was for them to have had a few classic albums in the 70s, and then, you have that fan base already that's looking for more of this. They were trying to find a fan base in groups that were either loving the metal music that was coming out of the Bay Area or the stuff off the Sunset Strip that was going to be your more hair metal, if you will. And they don't fit in really either one of those categories, so it allows them to kind of fall through the cracks a little bit. But having said that, obviously they've had a ton of success. They've continued to tour live. I would love to see this band live. Kind of really excited now about their 50th anniversary album because it'd really be curious to see what that sounds like after all these years. But
it's kind of funny when you consider a band like Yes, who you can compare these guys to. But in 1983, that was when Owner of a Lonely Heart came out.
Yeah.
So it's like even at that point, they had kind of deviated from what that 60s and 70s Yes sound was. So it does kind of feel like this album maybe just was wrong place, wrong time.
Yeah, if this comes out in 1974, like, man, I think this could have been right there alongside them. I mean, these guys are really talented. This album is great, though. If you're a fan of that 70s sound, the prog rock, the classic rock, like I said, Zeppelin and Yes are really good comparisons. You should give this a listen, and I'm really interested to listen to the rest of their catalog because I'm curious what it sounds like. Do they have the sound change as they release stuff later in the decade, or is it really just more of the same? And like I said, new album coming out soon, and I'm super excited to get to hear what Zebra sounds like in 2025.
Now I'm kind of curious. I kind of want to go back to the beginning of the alphabet, not over weeks and months or anything, but just as a one-shot thing, and just kind of look at what all I've broken into by just using this list.
Yeah.
What new music, new in quotation marks,
Yes.
but what music I've introduced myself to that I would not have listened to otherwise, and kind of maybe some of the standout hits that came out of that.
Yeah, for sure. And there's a lot of really interesting ideas for the vault, and I know you'll come up with another new one. I know at one point you'd mentioned maybe going back and finding some of the bands that have been picked over the new
Yeah, do
releases
like back catalog.
and do back catalog stuff. That would be kind of interesting because a lot of these bands we're discovering for the first time when they pop up on our list each and every week. So we know that some of them are new, some of them are not. So it'd be kind of cool to go back and check some of the old stuff out.
Yeah.
But yeah, Zebra, loved it. Album was great. Really excited to see what's next for those guys as they come out with something new. I am continuing on. Again, if you're new to this podcast, I started this gimmick many weeks ago. I decided to go through year by year and pick an album that was either influential to me or something I really liked. And we started in 1969 with the debut album from the band that would be known as Chicago Transit Authority. We are up to number 2017 is the year, and I'll be honest, this was tough. And at some point, like I said, we're going to stop this gimmick at some point. My plan is to go through Frontiers bands A to Z at some point. But, man, this year had several albums that I know you are fans of, you are a fan of, that I have not listened to that album. So I didn't pick those albums. But I think there are certainly more there than what I chose. But I only listed 3 that I really wanted to mention. The 2 honorable mentions and the album that I really did enjoy, the album that is my vault pick. But the honorable mentions are Hydrograd, the 6th studio album from Stone Sour. I really enjoy Stone Sour's sound. Song number 3 was the lead single off of this, but you also had Fabulous, Rose Red, Violent Blue. The song is dumb, and so am I. Those are the big tracks off of that album. A fan of Stone Sour, so definitely check that out. Monuments, the compilation album from Ed Guy. This is basically a greatest hits album plus 5 new tracks. These guys are awesome, so you know this is awesome. The greatest hits part of it is some of my favorite songs of theirs, so definitely check that out. First 5 tracks off of the CD are the new tracks, so you got the second CD as well, and a live DVD, and a live CD, 2 live CDs. Like it's a pretty big collection. Ed Guy's great, so check that out. But the one I'm going to pick this week is one that was a pretty early purchase for me when it came out. This is The Mission by Styx. It's their 16th studio album, and it is kind of funny to me for a band that may have started to fracture when they did a concept album. Kilroy was here. This is a concept album, which is kind of interesting that they've come back to that. Basically, it details the story of the mission to Mars, and the whole story. They basically met with the crews at NASA or whoever's involved with this mission, and kind of learned how everything that was going to go on with that. And then they wrote a whole album around it. The vehicle was named Key Dive, which ends up being a piano instrumental on the album. But it's just really great. Like, all the tracks are great. It's a great story. It flows from one track to the other, which I really enjoy. But it sticks, still sounding great in 2017, which is really awesome. Standout tracks include Gone, 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 100 Million Miles from Home, Locomotive, Radio Silence, The Greater Good, Time May Bend, the Red Storm, and The Outpost, which wraps up the album for all intents and purposes. But just really good stuff. It's great to see those guys just continuing to make good music. We talked last week about their tour coming up, where they're going to do some classic stuff in its entirety. So love Styx. They're fun live. I'd love to get a chance to see them again. But The Mission, really strong release from those guys back in 2017. Before we get to what I've missed, which wasn't much, of the stuff I mentioned, anything you want to comment on?
Well, first about the Styx album, I think you can do a concept album if everyone agrees on the concept.
Very true.
I think where you run into problems is maybe if not everyone's on board, or if you kind of betray what you think your trademark sound is.
Yeah.
I think anytime you minimize maybe what Tommy Shaw can do in your band, you're probably asking for something to go awry.
Going the wrong direction.
Yeah, I would say for sure. Yeah, my music collection from 2017 is not the strongest. I don't know what I was doing both in 2017 and 2018, but it wasn't purchasing and consuming a lot of new music. That being said, a couple of the albums that did stand out to me, AFI released a new album that year, self-titled, also called The Blood Album. Still kind of AFI doing their thing. They kind of have that, like, I don't even know how to describe their sound at this point in the game. It's just mainstream rock-ish kind of. Yeah, I don't know. They are just AFI.
Very solid.
Yeah, they're fine. There's nothing wrong with them. If you like their older iterations, you may not be super thrilled about this stuff, but I've enjoyed it. Tracks like Dark Snow, Still a Stranger, Aurelia. You mentioned Ed Guy, Monuments. Awesome too. The new tracks are fine. The old stuff is probably still where I gravitate toward with them. You had The Blood of Gods with the first album from Guar to not feature Dave Brockie. Kind of interesting and felt a little weird to not have his voice on there, but still a solid album. Tracks like War on Guar, Viking Death Machine, The Sordid Soliloquy of Solborg Destructo. It's Guar. What do you expect? Iced Earth released Incorruptible in 2017. Another solid effort from that band. They'd always been good at giving you just really strong metal. Great Heathen Army, Black Flag, Raven Wing among the tracks there. And then finally, probably the album that I enjoyed the most during the year was the effort from Trivium, The Sin and the Sentence. Trivium is good no matter what they're doing. This was no exception. You had tracks like the title track, also Beyond Oblivion, The Heart from Your Hate. They don't really release bad music, so it was definitely a good album and one of the few that I actually partook in for 2017.
Yeah, it was a thin year, as it turns out, in 2017, but in 2018, kind of maybe the same. So our gimmick may be dying a slow death here, but there, there's certainly some stuff there we would recommend. But yeah, it's definitely not the strongest some of the years that we've gone over during all the years we've done this gimmick. But that is going to wrap things up for this edition of the Music Weekly that we have every Sunday night. We'll be back again next Sunday night, 7 o'clock Eastern Time, with another edition. We'll be talking about the music of February the 14th, Valentine's Day. We'll see if we can find some great Valentine's Day presents for the listeners coming up next week on Music Weekly. Reminder, we'll be back at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time tomorrow morning, Monday morning, about 12 and a half hours from now, with another episode of the Nerdcast News Report. We'll get you updated on all the news you need to know to start your week. Big thanks to everybody for joining us wherever you joined us tonight. Big thanks to Chris for joining us in the chat tonight. Big thanks to Stove Lake Media for their continued support of the podcast. Big thanks to Mike for all the work he puts in on this one especially. And a big thanks to you, the listener, for everything you've done for us here at the Nerdcast Empire. I encourage you to follow us on YouTube and on Twitch. We got really cool stuff coming down the pike. We hope you're here to join us and join the Discord. Of course, that's where you'll find out about all things Nerdcast Empire. But that's going to wrap things up. We'll see you again tomorrow morning for the Nerdcast News Report. And until then, don't forget to join the Empire, the Nerdcast Empire.